recording. You're a go for liftoff.
All right, everybody. Welcome to 3D Club. That's pretty much it. JK. Um, today we're having a little group discussion about team co-op mode with Tom Dahlia, Trevor Healy, and Nick Camillo on a project that I think is insane. Nick, you want to start? Sort of. I guess I'll go to Ishi here, and you can sort of give a little blurb about yourself, what you do, and how you got roped into this whole thing. You want to start, Nick?
Sure. So, hi, I'm Nick. I live in Brooklyn, and I have been playing guitar since I was a little kid. And I guess, I mean, it's kind of a long story, so I don't know how much information you want me to give right now. But yeah, I don't do music professionally anymore. I do software in the city, but I still play guitar and write music all the time and trying to get my band going again. Last night I just played a show for like the first time in 5 years. I'm hoping to keep that ball rolling. And yeah, I can go into as much detail as you want, but a couple years ago, more like I guess like almost 5 years ago now, I talked to Trevor about building a double neck that's bass on the top and guitar on the bottom. And it's been a very long journey with all sorts of different ideas and iterations, and it's finally kind of happening.
That explains a little bit of how Trevor got roped into this. Trevor, you want to expand on that a little bit?
Sure. So Nick has been doing my website work since I met him, basically, which was maybe 9-10 years ago.
Yeah.
And then saved my butt when the entire website crashed and all the data was gone. So we like reconstructed a website like within a week. And then I was like, how am I possibly going to repay you for this? Because you also aren't a web designer. So you were like, I have no idea what to charge for this time. But you made it all happen. So we were like, all right, let's do a guitar. And then maybe like 2 months later, you're like, let's do a double neck. And then years have gone by, and I've even made Nick's friend, bandmate, a guitar, a 6-string guitar, probably. And I was like, I cannot possibly do this before I complete Nick's double neck. That would just be awful. And that was over a year ago. And so then we had it. I worked with my dad, who is an architect, on getting Nick and our sketches into the computer so that we could at least print out a template that I could cut by hand. And we did that. And Nick's ideas were really cool, but you'd been using Photoshop for a lot of it. So a lot of this was just like an image idea. And then how do we turn it into an actual functional instrument? And where do we put the controls? And what do you really need out of a double neck? Can we like start eliminating lots of switches and things? So there's been a lot of cool back and forth between Nick and I, and now Tom, because of all of us having taken the 3D class.
Yeah. I believe that was your segue there, Tom.
Oh, yes. So Trevor pushed Nick into taking the electric class, the first electric class. And so Nick, like, as we're going through the class, explained kind of what was going on and how he was like photoshopping guitars together. And Trevor was like, okay, you need to kind of like go through and design this, take this class. So Nick ended up taking the class, and then a lot of the people in the class ended up thinking that Nick was like this he was like lying through his teeth, because he ended up drawing he drew a guitar that was actually really, really nice, and like the model was done very well. And to this day, a lot of people still believe that Nick was like a sleeper agent, like he was just
He was a ringer.
Yeah, he was lying to everybody. So
I might have been one of those people.
Trevor
I
took
was
the
trained by the
acoustic
CIA.
Trevor took the acoustic class. And then I also worked on doing the healer bass necks with Trevor and figuring out how to make that work. So then it just kind of turned into, well, Nick was like, hey, like, would I be able to hire you to just go over like stuff that I've drawn? And I was like, yeah, like absolutely. Whatever you need help with, like just let me know. And then it turned into let's go and finish out this double neck project. So now we're here. We have a whole body drawn, and we have just about every step of the way. So like this file is an absolute mess. But I'll let Robin decide which way we're gonna go next with this. Do you have any questions, Robin, first, or should we?
I was kind of wondering a little bit about, as someone who has seen
Rat spinners, rat
Photoshop,
spinners, they don't stop. Rat spinners.
ramshackle Photoshop jobs here. Sort of what was your inspiration behind the design itself?
Yeah, so I play in like a crazy prog rock band called Party Friends. It's been a lot of different kind of stuff over the years, but like progressive, kind of mathy, complicated tapping style guitar, like two-handed tapping, more like a piano playing, I guess, has been how I play. And what's always been cool about that is that I'm sort of playing a mix between the rhythm and the lead, because my left hand's almost always doing like a chord, my right hand's doing a lead part. But it's like a pretty chunky kind of sound. And so my band's music always tends to be really bass driven. Bass is my favorite instrument, even though I'm primarily a guitar player. And the bass player in my band is so good, so much better than me or like anybody I've ever played with. And he kind of always gave me free reign to just write whatever I wanted, and he would be able to figure out how to play, even if it was like absurdly hard. And that's kind of shaped my creative process a lot over the past like 15 years. And I'm always like, I write for the most part, I write like the guitar and the bass parts for this band. And what that usually looks like is me in my room looping something on my guitar and then having to take my guitar off and go and grab my bass. And then once I'm done writing that part, then having to take my bass off and grab my guitar. And I've spent so much time just switching between my guitar and my bass in like the same session that like about 5 years ago, I was just wondering, hey, maybe I should just get a double neck. And I looked into it, and there just really aren't that many. And this is like around the time that I started talking to Trevor about that. Because when Trevor was like, hey, can I pay you back by building you a guitar? I've been playing the same Gibson SG Standard for over 15 years now, like almost like 17 years now. And I've never really wanted another guitar. And I had recently just bought a PVT 40 bass that I also really love. And so when he asked me if he could build me a guitar, I was like, well, I don't really need a guitar and I don't really need a bass, but what I really do feel like I've always needed is both of those things in one, so I don't have to take one off to play the other. But obviously, like a double neck is a really outlandish and kind of ridiculous thing. And so before I gung-ho asked Trevor to actually do this for me, I decided to try and verify whether this was actually a good idea. So I found I think this was before Eastman did their reissue of it, but I found this Telestar double neck that was made in the 50s on Reverb, bought it for a few $100s. It was totally piece of shit. It was like completely falling apart. I actually only was able to play it for a few days before the input jack fell in, and it's like a hollow thing, but with no way of opening it up. There's no like back cavities or anything like that. And so in those few days though that I played this like really horrible instrument, I realized that this is actually what I want. It wasn't fun. It wasn't that easy to play. It didn't really sound very good, but it was exactly what I was looking for, of just being able to like very quickly switch between the two necks and comfortably. And so I brought it to Trevor and was like, hey, you think this is worth fixing? He was like, well, you're probably going to need to replace the pickups, and we're probably going to need to like take the whole thing apart and like add back cavities, and like we're going to probably have to do like reset the necks and like maybe do a refret and like basically just build a new guitar. And that didn't seem worth it. And so that's when I asked Trevor, hey, would you be interested in doing a double neck? And at the time he was like, I've actually always wanted to build a double neck, but I've never done it before. But last time we talked about this, he was like, I have regretted this ever since.
Was it everything you ever dreamed, Trevor?
It coincided with actually becoming busy with needing to build the things that I put out into the world already.
Yeah.
So it was a very difficult thing to be like, okay, I could take a month to fucking just do this project, or I could actually make money and keep my employees. And, you know, and that's how it's been going for like 2 years. Like really, when it was almost 2 years ago over Christmas, my dad and I did that drawing together.
Yeah.
So it really has,
by the way,
it really has been brewing, and it's really been put on the back burner for way too long. And even last year when I did the class, I was like, okay, now I'm going to get down to business and start drawing. And I did for like 3 nights. And then it was like, you know what would be great is if Nick also could draw this. So then we'd be like really pushing forward. And we did that. So I would say it's time to share Nick's original stuff.
Yes, the original drawings.
yeah.
Where's
And
the-
also there might be the example of how you play.
Yes, the graphic. The graphic.
Oh,
please.
nice. So I sent those to you, right?
Yeah. Do you want to share a screen and do it, or do you want me to? I've got a lot of it here, but I don't have it in order.
Sure. Let me see if I can find the email I sent you. What's your email address?
It was the robinharthilt@gmail.com. Now the entire world has it. Totally fine.
All right, cool. Yeah, I found it. Okay, yeah, I'll just share my screen, I guess. So
All right.
I don't think these are in order per se, but I don't think that really matters too much.
Do you want to start with the Telestar, just to give everyone the...
Yeah. There we go. So yeah, this is the double neck that I bought, or I got not this red one, but this like, yeah, this something very similar to this with like a little bit less of a red hue. And there's a bunch of things that I really hate about this guitar. One being that the guitar is on the top and there's a whammy bar that is like very stiff, which means that like the whole point, at least for me, in having the two necks is that it's really easy to switch between them. And it's really not easy to do that when there's a whammy bar in the way of where your hand would go for the bass.
Yeah, I can see that. A little problematic.
But yeah, in general, aside from that, oh, and it has like a very non-standard number of frets on both necks, which was problematic for me. But yeah, aside from that, I thought this was just awesome. I don't know, I'm not really a huge fan of how it looks either, really, but it did the thing, you know. And there's actually a pretty cool band called the Matson 2, I think. They're like these two twin brothers. One of them plays the drums, one of them plays one of these double necks that he replaced the pickups in, and It's a pretty, despite I think mine was just in really bad, particularly bad shape, but that guy seems to shred it just fine.
I bet he had a ton of work done. I mean, like this is like every other fret is high. There's major
Yeah.
treble in the necks. Both bridges vibrate like crazy.
Yeah.
Like you pluck one note and it resonates like the entirety of the instrument, every screw.
Yeah.
And it has like a really microphonic sound, like kind of a pickup where like
Oh yeah.
you'd
Oh,
play
yeah.
like a note on the guitar and you'd like hear it on the bass.
Yeah.
I don't know, it was weird. But yeah, it was worth the money, even though I only got to play it for like 3 days, just because it was, I don't know, it validated me, validated that this is what I needed. So yeah, this is just like a collection of pictures that I took from Trevor and my Instagram conversations, because for a while we were just like spitballing, like what we look at all these weird double necks that we found, and like this isn't even a bass, but it's just like a pretty cool, wacky design. I think this is Joe Maphis. I don't know. And we just found all these really cool double necks. I always thought that the double neck with like a 12 string is really dumb. But I guess that's only because the only example I've like really seen of people using that is Led Zeppelin, and he just uses it for one song, which I think is like a gimmick, I guess. But lately I've been seeing a lot of bands that played 12 strings all the time, like Real Estate, I realized, uses a double not a double neck, a 12 string. I always thought he was.
Fun fact about this one though is it was used for like, you know, Speedy West style rockabilly, you know, pre whatever. And the notes, the strings are tuned not in unison, but in like fifths and fourths and thirds and whatever they need for the song. So it's to imitate like Merle Travis and Speedy West playing together.
Cool.
Like in tight unisons or tight, you know, harmony.
That's awesome. I never did not know that. That's really cool. And
TK Smith has some cool videos playing like the way that it was supposed to be used.
Wow, that's awesome. I would like to watch those. But yeah, I thought all these were really rad. This one kind of reminds me of Prince.
Is that not one of his?
It might be, yeah.
Or something of that nature.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't really spend too much time like researching the instruments themselves, but like again, like I don't really know. Well, I know a little bit now after taking Tom's class, but when I went to Tom's class, I didn't know anything, and I was just like basically like copying and pasting pictures from the internet, and then like it was almost like more of like a collage than like anything. So in terms of like where the bridges were supposed to go, like, and stuff like
Cobain
that.
Jag stang.
Yeah, I've just always likened it to the Cobain Jag stang.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for a while I was like, oh, so yeah, so we'll get to some of the pictures that I drew, but like, yeah, so like at first I was just like drawing weird shapes and stuff like that, and not really spending too much time thinking about like playability and stuff like that, just trying to make something that I thought looked cool. And after a while I kind of realized that even though these things kind of looked cool to me, they don't look like Trevor Healy's guitars at all.
And this was all done in Photoshop, or is this illustrated?
This is Photoshop, yeah.
Photoshop.
But I was like messing around with weird shit. Like this was like a transparent pick guard where you could like see the wires going through. I don't know. I was just doing wacky shit. And I don't know. There's just a bunch of different versions of this same kind of like.
I like how it's two bass necks.
Yeah. One's just bigger than the other. Like I just shrunk it down.
It's impressive that you made it 3D in Photoshop, though. We got that side angle there.
Oh yeah, all I did was just make a layer in the back and move it to the side, like word art. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, you can kind of see like, even though this is still very different from what we ended up with, you could see that I was kind of like trending towards a general idea.
Yeah.
I wish I could zoom out more. Then I was messing around a little bit with more of like Rickenbacker themed stuff, and around that time, like during my whole like exploration of this stuff, I was looking at I don't know, I was just trying to figure out what kind of pickups I wanted to put in and doing all sorts of research about that stuff, because that's not something I've ever really thought about, because I've always just played my Gibson SG and my PVT 40 and never even really considered changing them.
Yeah.
And I discovered Ronin and David Torn, and I was listening to all these videos, watching all these videos of people playing these foil buckers, and I really liked how they sounded. And right around the time that Ronin went out of business, they put them on sale, even though they didn't used to sell them directly. And so I scooped up two sets of those and sent them to Trevor. At first I was thinking, I forget what these are even called now. Black Star or something.
Yeah, Dark Star. And then when I was like learning more about how these pickups even work, I was like, oh, well, this is a really high output pickup and this one is not. So maybe it makes more sense to have the same exact pickups for both sides. And so yeah, there was a photo at some point of a bass that Ronan had made with the pickups. So we were like, well, I guess you can use it for a bass.
Yeah, I emailed the guy. I was like, hey, would this sound good on a bass? And he was like, yes. That's it. Thanks.
But Ronan was kind of cool. I mean, they send a template along with your pickups. So like I was like, well, at least, I don't need to template the pickup. There was a bunch of like just collecting parts.
Yeah.
And, anything to get it kind of moving a little bit forward.
Oh, I see a definite change in shape happening there.
Yeah, I was just experimenting. I mean, this is clearly the Rickenbacker headstock here. And like the 4003 arm or whatever. Yeah, the Rick Stang. Yeah, and then okay, so that's about the time where I was like, you know what? Like, even though I'm having fun, just like spitballing here, like, I want to make something that, since Trevor's making this for me, I want to make something that Trevor would make, or that at least feels like something that Trevor would make on his own.
Like has the Healy guitars aesthetic to it.
Yeah, exactly. And so I took another crack at it. I don't know if I can zoom out or something. There we go. Took another crack at it and ended up going with something along the lines of like a mix between like a Mustang and a Gibson SG. And I don't know if this is I can't remember. I don't know if this is the final one, but
that's the one that we worked off of, at least for the pick guard.
Yeah. And so
this is also around the time that I was like, okay, fine. Like that's good. I can handle this.
Yeah, and I don't know, it's fun. It was really fun to go through that process, especially, I don't know, it was almost like Legos or Play-Doh when I was a kid, because I just didn't know anything, like even this, like I superimposed a guitar and a bass and tried to line up the positions of where stuff was. And then like when we like, okay, so then it came around to like, I don't know, May of this year, and I was about to take Tom's class, and I always tend to learn better when I'm like making something for myself. And so I decided to design a guitar for Tom's class, which before I went to the class, so I could actually try to build it in 3D. And so this is the one that I designed for building in Tom's class. And even this, like when I went to the class, it was just like when we tried to actually mock it up, it was like those things are in totally the wrong place. And like you can like look at how the strings are going like in a horrible angle into the from the bridge to the headstock.
Yeah, but if you don't know, you don't know. You
And
know
I
what
just didn't
I mean?
know any of that stuff. Um,
Like classic brands such as Kramer and Jackson.
and I remember laughing so hard when I don't know if it was Trevor or Tom shared this picture of like a model holding a guitar, and she's like holding it by the strings, and her hand is like
The
over
headstock. Yeah.
Behind the
yeah,
capo. Yeah.
yeah. Um, yeah, and so I mean, again, these aren't in like in a particular order, but this is one of the necks that Trevor already built for it a couple years ago now, right?
That was something I actually wanted to bring up here. Trevor, you made the next before doing anything else?
Yeah, I knew that I could, if I was going to start anything, I should mill up some wood for the rough shape of the body. So I knew it was going to be a round, you know, X wide. And I started talking to some wood suppliers, and they were like, kind of absolutely not. Like, we cannot get beyond this dimension. So it's going to be a 3-piece swamp ash body that will be chambered. So I milled that wood also a while ago. And then, yeah, I knew I could make the necks because they're both healer necks and they're bolt-ons. So that wasn't that big a deal. But the fretboards match, so they're cut from the same board, and the neck blanks are cut from the same, 30 inches and 32 inches from the same board. Or end to end or something. I forget now. So the head cap. So the face of the instrument is the same on each neck, and the back is the same.
Yeah.
All roasted bird's eye maple with the tortoise pickguard material for inlays, which my friend Mark cut on his CNC machine.
And also looks really, really good. And they also possess the patented Healy tilted headstock for string break angle and stuff.
Yep.
Either headstocks.
So yeah, those are done, other than kind of the final carve.
Yeah.
Because I want to work around the heel shape that we'll show in a minute.
You want to take a second, Nick, and you showed the mock-ups of the thing you brought to Tom's class. You just want to quickly peacock what you actually drew in that class.
I see it lurking. I see it right there.
Oh yeah, there's me with the double neck too. Here, I think I've got it open in Rhino if you want to. I don't really remember how to use Rhino that well anymore.
Exactly.
But
I
had so much fun in that class, and like learning how to, like, I don't know. I made so many mistakes, and like that's why I decided to reach out to Tom, because I realized that I was not going to be able to do this without fucking it up in some like probably very small way that we wouldn't realize was a problem until we went to go and actually like cut things out. But I don't know, it just it was super helpful to learn how things were supposed to be aligned, and like to actually think about how things were going to get made.
But the knobs was a good lesson. So we talked about so the treble side of this guitar, the potentiometers are on that downward slope. So there was another student in the class named Jason. He's RL Thomas Guitar Works, and Nick, we're like, well, you have to be careful with your pots there, because you can't mount the potentiometers sideways, because you can't mill into the body at an angle.
Yeah.
So Jason was the one who was like, oh, Nick, go in and put some dishes around where your knobs are going to be. So you can see that Nick modeled that in. But like every time he would have like an idea, it would be a bunch of people saying, well, you'd have to do this to make X, Y, and Z work for that to work. Like, I'm pretty sure the plate for the mastery and also the bridge, because mastery is very they're very protective of everything they do. So if you even like think of making something that's similar to a mastery product, they will send you a cease and desist. So it's really hard to get their hardware online, but Kevin Maz, these Zam guitars, he provided you with the footprint and everything for that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It was so nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was like such a cool aspect of the class, is that I don't know, I definitely caught a lot of flack in the class because for everything that like Robin said when this first started. But everybody was really nice. I was the only person in the class asking like at least what seemed like stupid questions of like where to put things and how to decide on certain stuff. But everybody was really enthusiastic about answering my questions and telling me the kinds of things that I needed to consider or think about. And it was really fun and really challenging and really inspiring. And I really glad I took the class.
That was a awesome crew of people in that class to be taking it with too. That was
Yeah.
like, I think that class was like John Sullivan of Sully Guitars,
Yeah.
James
Yeah.
Gay, Robin. I think Nigel was in there. Like it was a really, really great crew of people that time around. But yeah, everyone was like super supportive of one another. And again, nobody believed that Nick was just going into this, cold turkey.
Well, it's just we had one day, right? Like one class, and then we come back the next day, and Nick like just drops this like fully formed thing. It's like
Went home and I worked on it all night.
yeah, fair.
I was a good student. Hold on, I'm trying to share the GIF.
And now you know why, like, I want to keep Nick around to handle my website disasters. Because it's usually like at lunch or something. I'm like, Nick, the thing doesn't work. And 15 minutes later, he's like, oh, that's taken care of. No problem.
I've got the GIF right here if you want me to.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
that's great.
Yes.
You want to unshare here? I don't think I can move
Sure.
you.
Yeah, so we ended up completely changing like the positions of all the elements here, but when I was first trying to decide where to put the switches and the knobs and stuff, I've never had a guitar with a whammy bar, and I don't know, I just wanted to make sure that I was putting stuff in the right place so that it would be good for me. And so I took a picture of me playing my SG from a show and then used that to like generally size up the rest of the double neck. And then I like used Photoshop to put turn my arm into like hinges so that I could simulate where my hand and my fingers would be and stuff like that. Which was a lot of fun. I don't know if I don't think it's not playing for me at least.
I've been waiting.
Okay.
Y'all ready for this?
And it's funny because even though I did this and it informed like the first version of this, when we actually went and started working on this in Rhino, we kind of scrapped a lot of this stuff because I pulled out my SG and my bass while we were doing it and realized that like a lot of this stuff actually doesn't make sense. Like having the toggle on the horn of the guitar does not make sense for me because I don't use a pick, and a lot of times I'm like strumming like this. And when I went and actually looked at my SG's pick guard, I realized that it was totally scratched up everywhere. And I realized that because I learned how to play on an SG, which has nothing on the pick guard, I never had to worry about avoiding anything on the pick guard. Whereas on most Fenders or even like a Les Paul, every time I play one of my friends' Les Pauls or friends' Fenders, I'm constantly hitting the toggle switches or the three-way switches and knocking myself out of place. And so when we were when Tom, Trevor, and I were finally working on the Rhino aspect, we kind of like scrapped it all, and that was like a whole process to figure out where everything should actually go.
I think that's what turned out to be like the most interesting part of the whole project, was that you have three different perspectives of people putting this together. So Trevor being the one who was going to make it, and Trevor having his distinct look of his instruments and elements that are in the Healy guitars that have to happen. And then me coming from the design aspect and saying, well, you know, this needs to be flowing here, and if you move this, then it's going to affect that. But then on top, so like Trevor and I would have a conversation, and then Nick would be like, but I play this way, and I would be bumping into that. So then Nick and Trevor would be talking about something, and then I would go, but if you move that, that's going to affect this as well. So we had like three different decisions being made at all times, and every time there was a conflict, quote unquote, then there would have to be a discussion as to, okay, well, how do we meet all three criteria, or what needs to change for all three criteria to happen. So it became really interesting, because it would be like Trevor and I'd be like, yeah, great, this is good, but then Nick would say, well, what about when I do this? And so, and not only just the playing aspect of it, but the feature aspect of it as well. So a lot of the specs for what the instrument can do changed by these informed decisions from three different people.
So at
There
this
was a
point, though,
piece-
it's still a bass and a six string.
Yes,
Yes.
so that stayed the same. That stayed the entire time. Do you want me to share the file? Do you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So this, we'll start with what Trevor and his dad sent. And then we can see how out of control this got. So here is the original drawing from Trevor's dad. And this was done on AutoCAD, right?
Yep.
Whereas I work on Rhino, and the guys took the class on Rhino as well. So like the layout was there. The first thing that we ended up doing, though, was we ended up shrinking this dimension. That was the absolute first thing that we did, because Nick was like, well, that's gonna like mess up some nerves in my armpit if it's that big. So we immediately went in, we started changing the dimension between the waist, getting it to what would work. We're looking at other guitars, other big guitars, to see what size we should be looking at. And all the time, like Nick said, the SG was there, the T40 was there, and all of those instruments are being handled and played as the instrument was being edited from what Trevor's dad had produced. So we started doing that. You can see we started building out the heel shape as well. We started kind of simplifying it down. So those of you who have taken the class, you know all about the rule of three. So I tried to preach that as hard as I can. And there was a lot of control points. So we started kind of reducing those down to get a smoother shape out of things. And then we were kind of off to the races. And I think after we got it, after we had gotten it shrunk down in size, so we have that 13-inch between the two waists, we addressed this area right here because Nick started playing the PB, and we're looking at where the frets ended up falling. And the PB has a much deeper cutaway than what was initially drawn. So we started editing the body that way to go and change that cutaway so it was a bit deeper. And I think that ended up somewhere, if we're working on pick road, somewhere around here, we started changing it. But we spent some time working on these areas of the cutaway and just making sure that we had tangency in areas. So when Trevor goes to cut this out, there's no surprises, there's no lumpy bumpies. We moved the pickups around. So we started with just this box of the pickup, and then Trevor was bringing parts home. We were measuring parts, which we'll get to having to change parts along the way. And we started building this out. So initially, Trevor was going to use one of those kick-ass bridges from Hip Shop, and that had to change because of the roundover of the body. So as you start getting more into this design process, you start bumping into more stuff that, you know, in an actual build process, when you're building the prototype, you do the body roundover and slap the bridge on there and go, oops. So it was nice to be able to catch that. And we swapped to a different Hip Shop bridge. Those of you who use any CAD software, if you're not aware of this, Hip Shop will just give you PDFs of their hardware that you can just import into whatever drawing you're working on. So we just did that. Crisis averted. The bridge was not going to end up on the roundover. And then, of course, if Kevin comes back and watches all this, he provided us with the Hip Shop, or I'm sorry, the mastery footprint. You can see it's kept very general so they don't get mad. And then the other thing that made it somewhat of a challenge was the necks had to stay the way that they were because they're already made. So we could not change anything within the neck because Trevor's already made them. We can't change the number of frets. We can't change the scale. We can't change anything. So everything there is set. But then from there, we started working on, and this was the original bridge we were going to use. So that's that OG Hip Shot. And we ended up using that one.
Those
STG.
PDFs are a blessing.
What'd you say?
I just said those PDFs are a blessing.
Oh yeah.
So then the pick guard, that was something that we spent a lot of time on, and that was a lot of back and forth. So we initially imported that original drawing from Nick, and then we scaled it up and we made it fit within the drawing, and then we started going from there. But there was a lot of back and forth about, you know, will the pickup be encapsulated or will it intersect at a different point? Trevor wanted it to like have decisions made in it that would follow what you would see on a typical Healy guitar. So like this area was this whole back edge ended up being quite a bit of back and forth, because Trevor wanted it to be something that he would do on one of his guitars. So what ended up happening is because the guys have the ability to draw on Rhino, they went in and started drawing their own shapes. So Nick ended up editing the pickguard one night with Trevor without me involved in it and coming up with an idea that would work for what they were looking for. So, you know, we went to having a round part here to completely rounding it over. We had this scoop here, and you can see where like changes were made and then stuff started to not work anymore. So this is where I came in and then had to keep that geometry, but make it work in a way that it was tangent. And then we went into doing controls, and I think we did the controls pretty easily. Like there was not much room between stuff to really not have it where it was.
Yeah.
But Trevor wanted to have the pickguard be in two pieces. All of you guys are repair people, or you build, and you know why that is a good idea. But having it be two pieces makes it a little bit difficult in the area where the two pick guards intersect, because you need to have your mounting screws. So Trevor had the idea to use this plate, and I'm kind of getting ahead of myself with this in that because of Nick's play style, and I did put a link to Nick's band, a YouTube video of Nick playing, so you can see why this was a decision. But one of the big decisions that we had, or one of the big conversations, was Nick is very, he taps a lot. There's a lot going on the guitar. So we wanted to find the most low profile switch that we could use for Nick to not interfere with the position of the pickups as he was playing. So we decided, Trevor bought a bunch of hardware home, a whole bunch of different switches, and we decided on a slider switch, like what you would see on like a Mustang. And we stuck it in the middle here, but we're using the plate that switch is going to be attached to kind of as a staple between the two pick guards. So after Trevor and Nick got their pickguard shape happy, I just went through and just made sure that we had some good lines. We
So
went in. Go ahead.
just real quick about that key pickguard piece, the two screw holes that you see will mount two into the wood, and then there's two screw holes that aren't there that mount the switch to the plastic plate.
Yeah.
That was like, as much as I started bringing stuff home, I brought a two-way switch home, not a three-way, yada yada yada. They're different. So I'll have to put two holes in the right spot.
So is this going to be a 2-position slider switch or a 3-position slider switch?
It's 3, so neck both or bass both or guitar.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
The other thing that was designed into this too was space for modification. So because not all of this was going to be CNC'd, the stuff that Trevor wants to decide down the road, there is space built in for that to happen. So the stuff that we weren't too terribly worried about, we just left it. And say that Nick plays the instrument and decides that something needs to be, I mean, we talked about, instead of using potentiometers, using rollers, because those are low profile. We did end up putting in spots for potentiometers, so we did end up putting in 3, but the whole instrument is designed in case something needs to change. So there's also like a contingency plan with these electronics. I was talking about earlier how Nick not only was worried about how he plays, but like the features of the instrument. So there's going to be taps on this pickup and a potential bridge pickup mounted to the face of the instrument. Again, we didn't go and lay it out because that's stuff that Trevor can do. He hand builds every day, so he doesn't necessarily need that to happen. But in terms of routing channels and stuff like that, it's nice to have templates. So the whole instrument is designed so that if something needs to be changed, it can be, which is really, really nice about it. And then with the pickguard, what ended up being pretty cool was I said, well, wouldn't it be sweet? Because you have a plate sticking out of the top, and the plate is going to be made out of the same material that the pickguard is going to be made out of. So I said, well, what if this little plate that sticks these two pickguards together, even sharing the screw holes to mount it to the body, what if we recess that down a little bit into the pickguard so it acts as a key piece? So then we started getting into 3D modeling. And if you look at the way that these pickguards are designed, if I get rid of this center piece, you see that we have actually left some space for this actual piece to stick in. So as the two pick guards go together, that little key piece exists between the two of them, and then everything will be indexed together. So, and then we had to go in and like model the hole for it in the pick guard. But since Trevor has a neighbor with a CNC now, we were like, okay, we'll just have a CNC make this pick guard. But we had to figure out, you know, where the seam was going to be on them, where it would make sense. We ended up matching the distance between this pickup and the distance between this pickup. So like as you roll through this, you start realizing like, well, now I have two very similar parts of this instrument that probably should be the same. So that would change things. That ended up being a pretty cool part of this. I'm really excited to see what that will look like once it gets made. And then we went into designing the actual templates for routing this stuff. So there's weight relief because Trevor's going to bend over the top where the arm bevel is. We have our neck route, our humbucker routes, the routes for the some transfer holes so that Trevor can use a transfer punch to just put in where those bridge holes need to go. Same thing with all this. And we also built in a lot of contingency plans. Like that seems to be the long-running thing with this. We needed a way to index stuff. So we actually picked a whole bunch of different holes on the instrument that we could use to index parts where there was already going to be holes existing. The only non-existing hole is this one little screw right here. That is just a random floater. But all the rest of them, like these would be the holes for the mount underneath the mastery. We have 3 holes that we could index off of for our potentiometers. We have the holes around the bridge. We have the bridge holes. This is also just a little floater that we stuck underneath the bridge. We made these little hot dogs for weight relief that would happen underneath the bent arm bevel. And then I think we were thinking about the back cavity and how we were going to index our back cavity. And we were like, well, we don't want to go drill holes in the back of this neck or in the back of this body. So we were kind of sitting there scratching our heads. And then Trevor and I at the same time were like, oh, we'll just use some bump pins. So the bump pins are something that Trevor uses. And I have used for actually making the healer base neck. So on the healer base neck jig, there are some bump pins at the top of the headstock. That's how I oriented the neck along the y-axis. So we ended up deciding to make some bump pins along the body after it's been routed, so that way the back cavity could be routed, and also our little ledge for our covers. So, and then just our little profile shape that could be flush trimmed. So it turned into a pretty big mess. There's a lot of different stuff, but I'm really happy with what we ended up with. I think it's going to be sweet, and I'm excited to see it be made.
Me too.
Y'all have any, Nick and Trevor, you guys have anything to add about all that?
I talked with my guy Sam across town, and we're gonna run some 1/8" plexi next week to test out the pick guards. Because I got that material in the actual tortoise material, but we don't want to run that first because it's like $200 worth of tortoise material.
Wow.
Yeah, I would definitely test run that.
And then he's also going to help me do all the templates, and I think a couple of them will just keep an MDF, and then a couple where we really do want to be able to see a little bit more, we'll do acrylic.
So I have a question for you, Nick, about electronics and stuff. Outside of the pickups, like what do you actually dream of? Like what do you want to go into this? Like you've got spots for 3 pots and whatnot, but when we spoke of this before, you seemed a little undecided on sort of where that was going to go.
Yeah. So I guess we still have to talk about the some of the details about the switching of the necks and stuff like that. But I wanted to make it so that I could either play both at the same time, like if I wanted to like play one neck and tap on the other, um, or switch between soloing them, because
Yeah.
I would like to play this live as well. I'm Tom, the bass player in my band, also wants to get a double neck. That's a 4/6, so that we can like switch between who's playing guitar and bass.
You should get one for your drummer while you're at it. I mean,
Yeah, I had the drummer play. Yeah, that'd be pretty ridiculous. But yeah, but I'm gonna use this. Oh, were you about to say something?
Well, so both pickups are humbuckers. All the pickups are humbuckers. So they're all three will have this series split parallel mini toggles. And like position kind of to be determined because they can just be 1/4 inch holes. So I mean,
Yeah.
it was just one of those things like it's just a hole. Like let's not dwell on positioning that. And then on the bass side, they're going to be sort of angled wheels, the thumb wheels. So
like
just
the Jazzmaster style.
Jazzmaster, but separated into two individual ones. So like Ohad, who works with me, might make a little mount for them, right, and 3D print it. Or we'll just cut the thing in the Jazzmaster 1.5 and add a screw to each one. I mean, lots of this stuff, I'm like, I kind of like doing that stuff. So, you know, got to have some headache involved. But the thumb wheels, I think, will be like sort of a little bit at an angle. So, like, you know, how your hand would move, right? So
Yeah.
want to go like this and like this, you could just do it real quick while you're playing if you
Yeah.
wanted to turn it down. I thought that was a really cool idea. So those will be up in the bass side.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was
the
important for
cavity.
me to make it so that I didn't have to like go all the way down to adjust the bass tone and in volume. I liked the idea of having each of them on the side that I was going to be currently playing if I needed to make an adjustment. But obviously with the guitar, you've got that whole bottom half that you can just move your arm to. But on the bass, your arm is kind of covering that portion of the bass, so you can't really use that whole area for anything. But when I was actually just playing my bass, I play mostly like thump style.
Yeah.
And then I switched to like finger style once in a while. But realized that there's even when I'm playing as crazy as I'm going to play, I'm almost never touching any part of the left horn or anything left of the pickups. And so it seemed like a really convenient place to just put a bunch of like rollers or like low profile switches that I know I wouldn't bump into. And so yeah, I don't know. For me, like the thing that I wanted the most was just versatility. So like that's why Trevor suggested the 3-way switches for series parallel and split.
And so my plan, if we do the bridge pickup on the bass, you can do a top mounted gold foil. So all I would have to do is drill a hole with the aircraft bit that goes to that channel that goes from the bass bridge to the mastery vibrato route. You know, we could have put another one in, but again, it's like a whole lot of what ifs, and we don't even know if we're
Yeah.
going to use it. but you know, maybe we'll throw one in before we actually route it. I think I will probably use the plexi pickguards as like the thing that I'm prototyping on. Like, okay, the wiring's great. Now we can drill the same holes or move them left or right. Like as long as function is good, then we can move stuff around on the actual guard.
That is kind of the beauty of being able to just draw this stuff out and then prototype it with the CNC, where you haven't wasted X number of man hours hand cutting this thing to only find out later that you need to move something, and said process begins all over again. Like,
Yeah, because I think Tom, or I don't know, Tom and I like I don't think we put that many restrictions on Nick, honestly. It was more just like it was like, oh, let's double check. Nope, those like the screw hole is, going into nowhere or whatever. It wasn't, it was just me trying to also put the Healy stamp on it.
Yeah, and I think we were just like the goal of doing it all together was just to work out as many of the potential issues that would arise in a normal build doing a normal prototype. We like I'm not saying that this model will absolutely be how this turns out. There may be something that we bumped into, but at least we've done our due diligence to make this like a lot quicker. There's going to be less waste of material if like, oh no, I drilled this in the wrong space and now either I need to repair this or like something needs to change here. So at least we have a much bigger step into the process. Still designed in a way that when Trevor goes and does run into those problems that inevitably will happen, at least we've covered more of our ground with this. And this will hopefully expedite the process of making this now.
Yeah, I mean, the moment we had all the templates separated, I was like, okay, I get it. I know what I'm supposed to do. Whereas up until that point, I just kept going, I'm gonna have to draw this by hand. And then superimpose, I don't know, what am I gonna draw it on plexiglass and like put them over the top of each other? I don't even know. I couldn't figure it out. So I gave up at some point.
Yeah, it was so much fun. I don't know. It was also really fun to do it with you guys because I also just wanted it to be something that Trevor was excited about too, and not just like, and I mean, that goes back to like all those like pictures that I started with, like transforming over time. But like, I don't know. It's one thing to make something for somebody, and it's another thing to make something for somebody that you're excited about and like proud of or whatever. So that was my goal, at least.
Like, yeah.
I was like really happy with the end of it, that you can see a lot of the stuff that Nick really likes. Like very clearly that bottom half pick guard is very SG influenced. And like that is very clear as to what that came from, but it's still like unique enough in that like you see the nod there, but and I think that's why so much time was spent on the pick guard. Like it that was easily what the most time was spent on, like
Oh yeah.
without a doubt. But coming out with something that is like unique to what Trevor's doing, but you can still see those nods, I think was a cool part of that whole process. It was just neat.
It's a
I had
fine
a lot of
line.
fun doing it.
You know what I mean? Like it's sort of a fine line where it's like taking inspiration from a design or a shape and making it your own, but it can't finding where it's like it becomes its own thing and not too derivative of the thing you kind of took it from. It's like sort of difficult to kind of balance that sometimes.
Yeah.
Is this what we're looking at, the final?
I believe so, yeah.
So I'll
You have issues with it now?
well, no, there's one. I don't sometimes I can't really figure out what I'm looking at in So like, you know how, yeah, if you look at that one, how we were looking directly at it, like, see, now you can see that the lower volume control or the tone knob is probably in the right spot, but when you look at a different angle, it looks like it's in the wrong spot.
Oh, that's because I'm in the perspective view.
Yeah, so like that's all I was curious about. Like, yeah, so that's straight on.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the sort of stuff that I just go, I'm like, what? Why is it over there? Oh, it's not over there. It's actually directly underneath. Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. All right. Well, does anyone have any questions for Trevor, Tom, or Nick about this whole thing? Anybody?
Ed gave a nice comment, which was cool.
I did not see that.
It is late now.
Thanks, Ed.
Good night.
Oh,
Nighty night.
there goes my emotional support, Ed.
That was
Any
good.
questions?
Anybody?
Well, I have a comment. When
There we
Trevor
go.
was telling us about this, what was going to happen today, it was a little bit more comical because you were saying Nick was photoshopping these guitars together and bringing them to you, and hey, can you make this? And you're like, no, dude, I can't. I mean, I see what you're doing. That's cool, but no. And then the light bulb went off. Why don't you take this class and then you can design your own?
Right.
It's just a good, testament that anyone could take this class, whether they're a woodworker or not, and get into it and go, wow, I can design guitars or maybe cars or airplanes or whatever,
Yeah, because Nick was like, honestly, if I could imagine Nick and and his friend like going down to the garage and starting to cut this, and then they would find out like, oh shit, like that's not an actual guitar scale or whatever.
right?
It's very much like, I mean, it's funny but necessary sometimes, like when someone who doesn't really know about what goes into it is asking like, what advice could you give me? It's like, I don't know, get a ruler. Like,
Read a book.
yeah.
If the neck was about this long, it would be perfect.
Right.
I'd be comfortable.
But like, we did look at that crazy double neck that you'd bought, and yeah, it has 17 frets. Like, what the hell is that
Yeah,
about?
what the fuck?
Like, like, why didn't they just do 21? But then at some point during the talk, I got really nervous that since I had made the necks, that I hadn't double checked how many frets I'd made. So I'm sure I'll go look at that later and be like, oh no.
Oh no.
Like when I pointed out, like, are the headstocks going to bump into each other? Like, is there going to be enough clearance to access the tuners and stuff?
Right.
I think there will, because
Oh yeah, there will be.
the Telestar was perfectly parallel, and Trevor from the get-go was like, no, we need to we need to do this.
And that was because I saw Hofner. Yeah, a Hofner double neck that was like really wide. It just looked so cool. But I thought, like, if I can contribute anything, it'll be like splay the necks.
Did you look at any like the Mosrite designs? Because they're all over the place,
Yeah, totally. There was one that I remember looking at a lot that maybe is a Hagstrom that Pat Smear played. It's just freaking amazing. And that's probably the first double neck I ever saw being replicated. There was a guy that I went to, Roberto Venn, or he went to the class before me, but he stuck around for like a month to try and finish this double neck, which was basically a Hagstrom copy. Yeah. So I mean, I have definitely wanted a double neck since like I was 6, and my science teacher would have his SG in the science room.
Wait, you had a
You
science
had a double neck?
double neck?
My science teacher had a classical guitar and a double neck always in the science room.
At Flood?
No, this was at a small sort of Montessori-esque school in West.
There you go.
Yeah. He still works there. And one time now he's close to 70, like he just won't retire. And he apparently still has the guitars, still follows like the same lesson plans that he's had forever. And I ran into him once, and he carries like a small little bag over his shoulder, and I'm talking to him about stuff, and he's like, "Oh, that reminds me." And he opens this folder, and it's photos of like all his classes through the years, like probably 2 pages per group of kids around that age, but it's specific to like a project. So he literally is like, here's like probably the first time that I showed you guys that guitar, and it's like all of us like gathered around the SG.
So cool.
Yeah, he's a cool dude.
Hey, Nick.
That's awesome. Hey.
Nick, if you crack the headstock on one or either of those necks, Trevor is your guy.
I was gonna ask if you left, like you squeezed in the glue and clamped it, and you're like, all right, take this clamp off in 5 hours.
Yeah, exactly. In time, you'll get used to this clamp.
You'll get used to this.
You hear that tone? It's really great.
Well, it wasn't like it didn't completely break. It was just like
I think it was like a hairline crack.
yeah.
Where
It
like I
still
couldn't
scared the
really-
shit out of me.
Yeah, I really couldn't open it that much, but did I glue it and clamp it?
I don't remember. I left it with you for like a couple days and
Oh,
came
then I
back.
glued it and clamped it. Yeah.
Yeah. I just remember being very grateful.
Well, I'm grateful.
I wish I went in and looked up when or at what point in the videos like you revealed your guitar that you designed in the class. Like that's what I'm looking at right now, but I can't find it. When everybody's like, "What?" But I can't find it right now.
I would like to try to make that one day.
I think you should.
I
It
think
was so good.
That thing is cool. That's a
Yeah.
really cool guitar.
Thanks, man.
It was day 2. It was around the 2.5 hour mark. I'm just saying.
Oh, you know? You know?
I'm
2.5 hour mark on day 2. All right, let's look.
just joking.
Ah.
Hey, you
I
guys should-
found the part where you were talking about where we were talking about the pots, but like nobody had like freaked out. So you must have shown us that before we had gotten to that point. But
I got to start working again, but I'll stay on here anyway. I'm just gonna mute.
Well,
Can you
That's
guys hear me?
What is that circle on that base, by the way? Is that just a print?
vinyl picker.
No, it's a record.
Oh, cool.
It's a Sparks record.
It looks really cool.
Mono My House. So in order to obviously a 12-inch record is not large enough to do the entire pick guard, so I made like 2 little Jaguar style plates that would make up the rest of the guard.
Yeah,
That looks
that's
awesome.
It does look awesome.
Thank you.
sweet. Is that one of those bird's eye nicks?
Yeah, this is the second officially finished
Oh,
Amdalia Nix.
yeah. Look at that.
Oh wow.
Spicy.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, awesome stuff.
All right. Are we concluded?
I believe we're concluded.
Think
It seems
so.
like this
Nice
would be a
work.
good place to put a pin in it.
Nice work, everybody involved.
Thank you
Thanks.
guys.
Thank you all for joining.